Hey all, Tony Bing here. Hello and welcome to another guide video for Marvel Heroes Omega for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Now the subject of this particular guide video will be one that I see come up very often across various different formats. That's in regards to stats in the game. A lot of people are asking what stats they should stack, what stats have diminishing returns, what stats would work in certain heroes. Whole lot of questions I'm seeing. So what I'll do in this video is I'll look at the 3 different stats that are available in the game, and those would be defensive stats, offensive stats and utility stats. I will talk about how the stats really work on certain heroes, and also whether or not those stats are actually subject to diminishing returns, or if they're a stat that you can actually stack as much as you want without any kind of penalty there. So the first set of stats we'll look at anyway will be the defensive stats. The first stat we look at then for this defensive stats section is average effective health. So the way this works is it will look at all the defensive stats you have and it combines them together, and then it gives you a sum total of what that would actually be worth were that to be your health pool. So this is a good indication of where your character's actually sitting from a defensive perspective. Now the next stat is slightly similar to this, it's damage reduction, and the way this works, it will actually take into account your defense rating, deflect rating and dodge rating, adds them all together, gives you your damage reduction, and your damage reduction applies to all attacks that actually hit you, so it's really important for that reason. Now if we look at the 3 stats we've just mentioned here, we have defense, deflect and dodge. So with your defense rating, this will build directly into your damage reduction, so your defense rating affects all attacks that will hit you. You then have deflect rating. Now if you successfully deflect an attack, you will take 50% damage from that attack, and you'll actually reflect some of the damage back onto the enemy as well. We then have dodge rating, and this one really is quite fantastic. So if you successfully dodge an attack, you won't take any damage from it at all. So this one really is great. Now under each of these 3 stats you'll see that it says there's a rating multiplier. So the way heroes are set up is they can have potentially 2 out of 3 of the defensive stats as a rating multiplier. So let's look at Hawkeye for example. We've got him on screen. Now his defensive stats that he gains a multiplier to would be deflect and dodge. So for that reason those are the 2 stats that you want to actually stack on a hero, so make sure you do check them before gearing a hero. Now next up we have a nice simple one, which is health regen. This is per second you actually regenerate health. We then have health on hit, so this one very similar to health regen, but it's not passive and you need to actually hit an enemy in order for it to be active. And I will mention this does have a 1 second internal cooldown, so if you're going a hero that fires off an attack 10 times a second, you won't be regaining the health every time. It would make you unkillable. So for that reason you've got the 1 second internal cooldown on it. Next up, another simple one, and this is summoned ally health, and really, if I'm being honest, I don't think there's much I can say about this other than if you have any summons, this will increase their health pool. Very self-explanatory. Now the next stat, this isn't really explained anywhere at all, so this is tenacity. It's a pretty useless stat. The way tenacity works is the higher tenacity you have, it will reduce the time that you're actually crowd controlled when an enemy hits you with a crowd control attack. But the way the game is set up now is we have our dashes which have automatic crowd control in them. So for that reason, never go out your way to stack tenacity at all, and to be honest, if you get it on a piece of gear, try and find the better piece of gear that has a better stat than it. But what we'll look at next, and this is where things get a bit more interesting because the stat sheet's got a few errors in it, but it will be the offensive stats. So we have a whole lot of offensive stats as you can see here in the tooltip to actually cover, but a lot of them are remnants of the PC game and are not really relevant anymore, so hopefully we will be getting an update to the stat sheet for that reason. The first one we look at is attack speed. So this is a pretty important stat because not only does it of course increase the speed on your spenders, but it actually increases the animation in which you fire off skills as well, so it can make your hero feel a lot more fluid. Now you can gain up to 25% through the infinity system, and that's what I would recommend actually stacking this stat once you do get enough infinity points. It is subject to diminishing returns, and you find that when you do get into the region of round about 25 to 28%, the diminishing returns will really start to hit quite hard on it, and at that point I would recommend easing up on actually gearing for it, because you won't be getting much returns. Now next up we have crit hit rating. So this is an exceptionally important stat. So when you hit, you have a chance of a critical hit. The damage your critical hit does will be based on your critical damage rating. Now crit hit rating is subject to diminishing returns. Once you get round to the region of about 50 to 55%, that's when you want to start pulling back in this, because it won't be as efficient. Currently we don't have the percents on the stat sheet. Again, it's something that needs to be added, and hopefully will be added sooner rather than later. The crit damage is not subject to diminishing returns at all, so you can stack as much of this as you actually want, and the higher your crit rating goes, the more you'll get out of this, because you will be critting more often. Now if we look at the next few tags, they are melee crit, range crit, physical crit, energy crit, mental crit, and area crit. Now these are all remnants of the PC tagging system, because on console we've got very different tags. Run through a list of the tags, and I was going to show them off in this video, but there's over 20, so I'm not going to run through them all. But you have on console, for example, you've got hand to hand, you've got gun, you've got force, explosive, leap, electric. There's a ton of different tags. I'm not sure how they're going to do the listing of them, but when you do pick up certain pieces of gearing, normally through certain legendaries and artifacts, they will have crit hit rating to certain damage types, so just bear that in mind and do look out for that. Now next up we have your brutal strike rating. So what a brutal strike is in simple terms is you fire off an attack and it crits. That attack then has a chance to crit again, and if it does, it's classed as a brutal strike. Now brutal strike will be affected by your brutal damage rating, doesn't have diminishing returns at all, and it will also be affected by your critical damage rating as well, because a brute is a crit of a crit, so it makes sense that it will take your flat damage into account, your critical damage into account, and then finally it takes your brutal damage into account as well. Now brutal strike rating, subject to diminishing returns, similar to critical strike rating or critical hit rating even. You want to get this into the region of about 50%. Anything after that, it won't be as efficient to actually stack. For our actual damage rating, this comes from your flat damage you have on items. So this would be, for example, your slot 1 and your slot 5, and for Hawkeye he has cosmic gear, so that offers 1200 damage rating on each of them. That's why we have the number of 2400 in total. If you have any artifacts or gear that offers flat damage rating, it will be added to this. Now your base damage comes from your attributes, so this will start off at 40%, and for each point in your main primary attribute you will gain 4% base damage here, and 1% base damage is worth 40 flat damage rating. A lot of numbers here getting thrown around, I hope you're keeping up okay. Now if we look at the next section, it's all those same damage tags that no longer apply, such as physical, energy, mental, so we can skip past all that. And the final tag we look at is summon damage rating. So this one's a bit complicated to explain. I'll say the word summon a ton of times, but hopefully you can keep up. So the way this works is you're on a hero that has summons and you have the summon damage tag. You find gear that has summon damage on it, they will of course gain a bonus from that. But on top of that, you're not pigeonholed into using simply summon gear on summoners, because they're meant to be played hybrid. They're meant to be played where the hero's doing lots of damage and the summons are doing damage as well. So the way it works is, let's just say for example you were on Rocket Raccoon and you had energy damage and it was a certain amount. That was your highest damage stat as well, I will say. Now your summons will actually gain damage from the summon damage tag, but on top of that they will gain damage from your highest damage tag as well. So in the case of Rocket Raccoon, it would be energy damage and then it would be summon damage, and you would add them, two of them together, in order to give you your total there. Bit confusing, hopefully I've explained it and it does make sense. If not, let me know in the comments below and I can flesh it out a bit more. But But what we'll look at next, thankfully, will be a much simpler section, and this will be the utility stats. So as mentioned, we finish up with a really nice simple section here. So for the utility stats, we start off with bonus spirit recovery. This is per second, and it will actually activate while you're in combat as well. Now next up we have spirit on hit, which you can get through various pieces of gear. Like the life on hit, this has a 1 second internal cooldown, because otherwise heroes who had very fast hitting attacks would essentially have unlimited spirit with all the attacks they would be firing off. We then have spirit cost change, so with this, pretty self-explanatory. Any skills you fire off will cost less spirit. Now this can be pretty important on some heroes, because there's a few such as Scarlet Witch or Angela that the more you stack this, it will actually reduce the cooldown of their signature. The reason for that is they don't actually spend spirit in a conventional way, so you're still getting a benefit out of this stat if you can get it. We then have movement speed, so simple enough, you move quicker. It's one that I'm a fan of. Don't look for it on gear or anything like that at all, it would be a wasted effects. Look out for it through the infinity system, because it's tied in with the attack speed increase as well. Next up we have a stat that's really not on many pieces of gear at all, and the only one I know on the console version where this is available would be the Warlock's Eye, and that gives you, I believe it's 10 or 20% power duration. So this increases the duration of dots and other skills that are on a timer. What it won't increase the duration of is ultimates or signatures, because it would simply be too powerful if it did, so just do bear that in mind. Next up we look at stats that are tied in with the boosts. The first one we look at is the shield supply point multiplier. Very self-explanatory this one, and it will go up to a maximum of 5 stacks. We then have credit find, you can actually increase that, and that would be through your currency boosts. Same with the bonus XP again from actual boosts, or of course I have the 100% which you get from leveling heroes to 60. For each hero you get to 60 you get 10% bonus XP, and it currently caps out at 100%. Now that same bonus can actually be found in the next line, which is the hero synergy bonus XP, so that's the same bonus you're seeing across these two lines. You then have prestige level, which I've not prestiged any heroes yet, but we'll get round to that in time again. That's pretty self-explanatory. Infinity points earned, so I'm doing not bad now with all the heroes I've levelled, and I'm currently up to 90, so they show here. And then finally we have the number of legendary quests that you've completed. So unfortunately on Hawkeye, not done any legendary quests yet for him, so I really need to get doing that so I can get buying some legendaries. But that's all the stats covered. I hope this was useful, I hope it wasn't too confusing, because I know it is a lot to take in. If there's any questions, of course, feel free to ask below. Thanks as always for tuning in, and I'll see you all again soon.